Rain came down hard enough to blur the streetlights into trembling halos. He was locking the cafe door, fingers numb. Apron still knotted at his waist. When the sound cut through the storm, a sharp gasp, then the sickening slap of flesh against wet asphalt. He turned just in time to see her go down, legs folding under her like they'd given up, palms scraping uselessly as she slid. For half a second, his mind argued end of shift, rent due, daughter waiting at home. But the street answered first. Tires sliced through puddles inches from her head. A horn blasted. Fear punched straight through him. He ran. His shoes skidded, rain soaking him instantly, but he didn't slow. The umbrella snapped open as he reached her, wind trying to tear it from his hand. He dropped to one knee, blocking the spray of passing cars, heart slamming as if it wanted out. Her breath came in broken pulls, eyes wide and unfocused, rain streaking her face so it was impossible to tell what was water and what wasn't. He angled the umbrella low, creating a fragile dome of quiet in the chaos, and felt the absurd tenderness of it, this small circle of safety he was offering a stranger in a city that never stopped. For a moment, everything balanced there. His fear, her pain, the road rushing past, and the knowledge that if he hadn't looked up when he did, this night would have ended very differently. Up close, she looked younger than he'd thought. Rain plastering her hair to her cheeks, eyes glassy with shock. Her whole body trembled, teeth clicking softly like a sound she couldn't stop. When she tried to move, pain flashed across her face and she sucked in a sharp breath, hand flying to her ankle. He saw it then, the angle wrong, swelling fast beneath soaked fabric. His stomach tightened. He slid his coat off without thinking, the fabric heavy with his warmth, and wrapped it around her shoulders, pulling it close as if it could hold her together. He spoke low, steady, the way he used to when his daughter woke from nightmares. "Don't move. I've got you." He didn't know if the words were true, but he needed them to be. Headlights flared, too bright, too close. A car sped past, spraying icy water over his back. Instinct took over. He shifted, planting himself between her and the road. One arm out, palm raised like he could stop traffic by will alone. His pulse thundered in his ears, fear sharp and electric, but he didn't step away. Her fingers caught his sleeve, gripped desperate, and in that touch he felt it, her trust. Sudden and total, settle on him like a weight he could never drop. The engine sound was wrong, too smooth, too deliberate. He felt it before he saw it, a presence pressing into the edge of the moment. Headlights cut through the rain and slowed, not passing like the others, not hurrying away. An unmarked sedan rolled to a stop just beyond the puddles, dark windows breathing suspicion. The woman stiffened instantly. Her hand, which had been clinging to his sleeve, tightened hard enough to hurt. Her eyes snapped past him, fear turning sharp and focused. No longer the fog of pain, but something learned. A man leaned out of the driver's window, rain slicking his hair, voice carrying through the storm. He said her name like it was a claim. Not concern, possession. The word hit her like a blow. She flinched, shoulders curling inward, trying to make herself smaller inside his coat. The waiter's chest went cold. He followed her gaze, every instinct screaming that this was the moment things tipped the wrong way. "I'm fine," she said too quickly, voice cracking. No," the waiter cut in, surprising himself with the force of it. He shifted closer, widening his stance, blocking the line between her and the car. Rain soaked his shirt, plastered the apron to his legs, but he didn't move. "She's hurt. She's not going anywhere." The man's eyes flicked over him, measuring, dismissive. A smile tugged at his mouth that didn't reach his eyes. "We can take care of her," he said, already opening the door. The street felt suddenly narrow, the air tight. The waiter's pulse pounded so loud he thought it might give him away. He imagined his daughter's face, asleep at home, trusting him to come back. He imagined what would happen if he stepped aside. He shook his head once, firm. "Back off." The words tasted like metal. He raised his hand, palm out, a silent barrier. And for a breathless second he thought the man might get out anyway. The rain hammered down, seconds stretching thin and dangerous. Then the door shut. The sedan lurched forward, tires spitting water, disappearing into the night without another word. The sound faded, leaving only rain and his own ragged breathing. He stayed where he was, body tense, waiting for it to come back until the woman finally exhaled. A broken, shaking sound, and pressed her face into his shoulder like she'd just escaped something far worse than a fall. The rain didn't ease. It kept coming, relentless, as if the night itself was testing how much more it could take. He scanned the street, arm raised, waving at the blur of headlights with a desperation that surprised him. Every car that passed without slowing tightened the knot in his chest. She leaned into him now, weight unsteady, breath shallow, and he felt the quiet terror of knowing. He couldn't stay like this forever, couldn't protect her from everything. Finally, yellow cut through the gray. A cab slowed, brakes hissing, tires sending up a curtain of water. Relief hit him so hard his knees almost gave. He helped her shift, careful and slow, every movement measured, feeling the heat of her pain through the thin fabric of his shirt. She winced but didn't cry out, jaw clenched, pride or fear keeping the sound locked inside. At the open door, he hesitated. Letting go felt wrong, like stepping back from the edge of something unfinished. He fumbled in his pocket, fingers numb, pulled out a small worn card from the cafe. The ink smudged as he wrote his number, rain turning the letters crooked and uneven. He pressed it into her palm, closing her fingers around it before she could refuse. "If you need help," he said, voice rough, "call." It sounded too small for everything that had just happened. She looked up at him then. Really looked, eyes bright, searching, memorizing his face as if afraid it might vanish with the rain. Her lips parted, 1,000 words fighting to get out. But the driver cleared his throat, impatient. The door shut with a final thud. The cab pulled away, red taillights bleeding into the wet street. He stood there long after it disappeared, rain soaking him to the bone, heart still racing, wondering who she was, what she'd been running from, and whether stepping into her night had just changed his life in ways he couldn't yet see. The apartment smelled like oil and toast when he finally got home. Shoes squelching softly as he slipped them off by the door. The clock on the microwave blinked late, accusing. His daughter was asleep on the couch, curled around a pillow, cartoon frozen mid-laugh on the TV. He covered her with a blanket, fingers lingering in her hair, grounding himself in something real and safe. Only then did his hands start to shake. In the kitchen, he leaned against the counter and let the night catch up to him. The image replayed without mercy, the way the sedan slowed, the way the man said her name, the fear that lived behind her eyes. He imagined a different ending and felt sick. He wondered if he'd done enough, if the card would smear into nothing, if the cab would take her somewhere worse. Every creak of the building sounded like tires returning. Sleep came in pieces. Rain tapped the windows like knuckles asking to be let back in. He woke before dawn with his heart racing, reaching for a phone that hadn't rung. At work, he burned toast, dropped plates, stared too long at the door whenever it opened. His manager scolded him. He nodded, didn't hear a word. Between orders, he checked his phone, then checked again. Shame and hope wrestling in his chest. By the third day, he told himself it was over. People cross paths and move on. Cities eat moments like that and never look back. Still, when his daughter asked why he looked tired, he smiled too fast and said it was nothing. And yet, every time rain clouds gathered, his pulse picked up, as if some part of him was still standing in the street, soaked, waiting to see what trouble he had just stepped into. The afternoon light slanted through the living room in tired stripes, catching dust in the air as his daughter lay on the carpet with her. Notebooks spread around her like fallen leaves. The TV murmured in the background. Some daytime news show he hadn't bothered to change, voices blending into a harmless hum. He stood at the stove, turning eggs in a pan, the ordinary sounds of home trying and failing to quiet his thoughts. "Daddy." Her voice cut clean through everything. Not playful, not bored, sharp with certainty. He turned, spatula frozen midair. She was sitting up now, eyes fixed on the screen, finger lifted and trembling as it pointed. "That's the lady," she said again, slower, like she needed him to understand. From the rain, his chest tightened. He followed her finger. The camera zoomed in on a familiar face. Hair neat now, posture strong, standing beneath blinding lights. For a second, he didn't breathe. It was her, older somehow, steadier but unmistakable. The woman from the street, the one whose fear had soaked into his coat. The pan hissed angrily, forgotten. On the screen, the anchor's voice sharpened. Words like investigation and evidence and powerful names sliding into the room. The woman spoke, her voice clear but carrying weight. Like every word had been fought for. She described being followed, cornered, almost taken. His stomach dropped as the pieces locked together, the sedan snapping back into place in his memory. She mentioned the rain, a stranger, an umbrella, a waiter who didn't walk away. His daughter looked up at him, searching his face. "You helped her," she said, not asking. Pride bloomed in her eyes, pure and bright, and it hit him harder than fear ever had. He swallowed, throat tight. As the woman on the screen lifted her gaze toward the camera, toward him, it felt like, and for the first time since that night, he understood exactly how close the world had come to breaking in two. The phone vibrated on the counter, soft but insistent, a sound that didn't belong to the quiet of the room. He stared at it as if it might vanish if he waited too long. Unknown number. His daughter was still watching the screen, the woman's face glowing with studio light, her voice steady and brave. The past and the present pressed in from both sides, and his pulse began to race. He picked up the phone and stepped into the narrow space by the window, lowering his voice without knowing why. "Hello?" The word came out cautious, guarded. For a breath, there was only silence, the faint rush of air on the other end. Then her voice, clearer than the night had allowed, warmer, carrying something like relief. "It's me," she said. From the rain. His grip tightened. The city outside blurred as if the glass had fogged over. She spoke quickly now, like she'd rehearsed and was afraid of losing her nerve. She told him she was safe. She told him the man in the car had been stopped. She told him the card had smudged, but the number survived. And she'd kept it like a promise folded in her pocket. Every sentence lifted a weight he hadn't realized he was still carrying. "I needed you to know," she said, softer, "that you didn't just help me up. You gave me time. Enough to fight back." He closed his eyes, breath shaking, rain and headlights flashing behind them. He hadn't thought of himself as brave, only present, only unwilling to leave. From the other room, his daughter laughed at something on TV, unaware of how close he was to breaking. He leaned his forehead against the cool glass, listening as the woman thanked him again, voice thick with gratitude. The call ended gently, without drama. But when the line went dead, he stayed there a moment longer, heart full and aching, knowing the night he'd run into the storm had finally found its way back to him. The news segment ended, applause echoing softly from the television speakers before the studio lights dimmed. The room felt strangely still after it, as if even the walls were listening. He walked back to the couch and sat down, and his daughter immediately leaned into him, small and warm, her head fitting perfectly under his chin. He wrapped an arm around her, holding her tighter than usual, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, grounding himself in this quiet victory. Outside rain began again, lighter now, almost careful, tapping against the windows like a familiar knock. It sounded different than before, no longer urgent, no longer cruel. He thought about the woman on the screen. Standing tall, her voice finally heard, and felt something loosen in his chest. The fear that had followed him for days eased into something softer. Relief edged with awe. His daughter tilted her head up, eyes shining. "You're a hero," she whispered, as if saying it too loud might break it. He smiled, a real one this time, and shook his head gently. "I just didn't walk away," he said. Though even as he spoke, he understood how much that mattered. On the TV, a new story began, life moving on without pause. In the kitchen, the smell of burnt eggs still lingered, a reminder of how ordinary this day was supposed to be. He kissed the top of his daughter's head and stared out at the rain-washed city, knowing that one small decision, one step into the storm had connected 3 lives in a way that would never completely fade.